Hey guys, tonight we begin with a history that likes to dress medieval kings and queens in glittering crowns, velvet robes, and banquet halls filled with music. But peel back the silk curtains, and you'll find something far darker. Some rulers collected lovers like trophies, others collected skulls, and a few managed both. When we talk about body counts, we're not just talking romance, we're talking corpses stacked in forests, skulls turned into architecture, and secrets so twisted they make today's scandals look tame. So the real question is, were these rulers remembered as elegant monarchs or monsters hiding in plain sight? Tonight, we're stepping into a side of medieval history you were never meant to see. And once you do, you'll never look at a crown the same way again. If you enjoy exploring the strange and hidden sides of history, please like and subscribe. It motivates us and helps us dig deeper and bring you even more mysterious stories from the past. Imagine you're walking into a castle. You expect marble floors, golden crowns, shimmering gowns, and a sense of majesty. But instead, you hear shouting, smell sweat and lamprey stew, and notice that the queen looks furious while the king is busy giving castles away to his favorite friends. Welcome to medieval royalty. We often picture kings and queens as elegant figures straight out of fairy tales. But behind the jeweled crowns and painted portraits, many of them lived lives so scandalous, so messy and so outrageous that they'd make today's celebrity gossip look like kindergarten drama. And when I say body counts, I don't just mean lovers. I mean enemies, rivals, and sometimes literal bodies piling up. Tonight, we're diving into the wildest, craziest body counts of medieval rulers. Some tragic, some hilarious, and some, let's be honest, downright disgusting. So light your candle, sit back, and prepare yourself. Because once you hear these stories, you'll never look at medieval queens and kings the same way again. Let's start with Edward II of England. A king remembered less for his royal wisdom and more for his royal obsession with one man, Piers Gaveston. Edward wasn't subtle. He showered Gaveston with titles, jewels, and even castles. He would ignore his wife, Queen Isabella, and instead parade Gaveston around court like a prized jewel. It was as if the king had discovered medieval Instagram, and every post was a selfie of him and his favorite guy. The nobles were furious. Isabella was humiliated. Imagine the scandal, the King of England flaunting his affection openly, while his queen sat sidelined. It wasn't just gossip, it was dangerous politics. Nobles felt Gaveston had too much influence. Eventually, their hatred boiled over. Gaveston was captured and brutally executed by Edward's enemies. Did Edward learn his lesson? Not at all. He replaced Gaveston with another favorite, Hugh Despenser. Same drama, same outrage. This time, Queen Isabella had had enough. She teamed up with her lover Roger Mortimer and raised an army against her own husband. Yes, the queen literally invaded her husband's kingdom. Edward was overthrown, and then came his infamous death. According to rumor, his enemies executed him by inserting a red-hot poker into a place no king would ever want. Historians debate if it's true. It may have been propaganda to humiliate him, but either way, Edward II's body count was one for the ages. And you have to wonder, was Edward just a king who loved too openly? or a man punished for breaking the norms of his time? Eleanor of Aquitaine. If medieval queens had a reality show, Eleanor would have been the star. Charismatic, dramatic, scandalous, she lived for the spotlight. She first married Louis VII of France. Problem? Louis was practically a monk in a crown. Serious, devout, boring. Eleanor, on the other hand, loved poetry, music, and excitement. Their marriage was doomed from the start. Gossip even swirled that Eleanor had an affair with her own uncle, Raymond of Poitiers. Eventually, she dumped Louis. How? She pulled off the medieval version of a power move. She had the marriage annulled. Then just weeks later, she married Henry Plantagenet, who soon became King Henry II of England. Eleanor didn't just upgrade. She doubled her influence, becoming queen of not one, but two major kingdoms in her lifetime. But Eleanor wasn't just about marriages. She gave birth to 8 children, including Richard the Lionheart and King John. And when Henry II pushed her aside, she supported her sons in rebellion against him. Yes, the Queen of England actively plotted against her own husband. Oh, and she created the Court of Love, where knights and ladies gathered to celebrate romance, poetry, and, let's be real, medieval flirting. Some historians even say she encouraged a culture of affairs, disguised as courtly love. Eleanor was scandalous, powerful, and unforgettable. She wasn't content to be in the background. She wrote herself into history with a pen dipped in drama. Now, imagine a pope. You probably think of holiness, quiet prayer, incense filling the air. But Pope Alexander VI, he threw parties that would make Las Vegas blush. Born Rodrigo Borgia, he became Pope in 1492 and immediately turned the Vatican into something closer to a nightclub than a holy city. He openly kept mistresses. He openly fathered children. And he openly celebrated excess. The most infamous story? The Banquet of Chestnuts. Historians describe it as an obscene feast with dancers, food and indulgence that crossed every line of decency. Imagine the spiritual leader of millions, throwing what was essentially a medieval frat party, but with more gold and scandal. His children, Cesare and Lucretia Borgia, were equally notorious. Cesare was a ruthless warlord, and Lucretia was rumored to dabble in poisonings and intrigue. Whether those rumors were exaggerated or not, the Borgias became the poster family for corruption, lust, and betrayal in Renaissance Europe. And how did Alexander die? Fittingly, possibly poisoned. The Pope of Indulgence, brought down by the very tools of intrigue he so loved. Next, let's talk numbers. If we're measuring body counts by children, King Henry I of England takes the crown. Henry wasn't known for his charm or his looks, but he had one talent: fathering children. He had more than 20 illegitimate children. Yes, 20. And that's not even counting his legitimate ones. Unlike many kings, Henry didn't just ignore these kids. He acknowledged them, gave them lands, and married them into noble families. His children were everywhere in court, creating webs of alliances and drama. The royal palace must have felt less like a court and more like a very complicated family reunion. But Henry's end? Less glamorous. He died from eating too many lampreys of slimy, ill-like fish that he loved despite doctors warning him against it. Imagine that, A king who survived rebellions, betrayals, and scandals, only to be undone by a plate of fish. And finally, Isabella of France. If Edward II was the king who loved too loudly, Isabella was the queen who roared back louder. Married to Edward, she endured years of humiliation as he flaunted his favorites. But she wasn't just any queen, she was the daughter of the King of France. And she had patience. She bided her time. When she met Roger Mortimer, sparks flew not just romantically, but politically. Together, they plotted Edward's downfall. Isabella crossed the Channel with an army, invaded England, and deposed her own husband. For a brief, glittering moment, Isabella ruled England with Mortimer by her side. But power, as always, is fleeting. Her son Edward III grew up, took control, and turned against her. Mortimer was executed. Isabella? She lived out her life in luxury confinement, a queen both victorious and defeated. They called her the She-Wolf of France, a name that captures her strength, her ferocity, and the scandal she left behind. And here's the wild part. These are just the lighter scandals. Affairs, parties, rebellions. But medieval history hides darker stories. Rulers whose body counts weren't just measured in lovers, but in the thousands of lives lost to their greed, cruelty, and bloodlust. What happens when passion, politics, and power twist into something monstrous? That's where we're headed next. When we last left our story, we were laughing at kings who ate too much fish, queens who plotted rebellions, and popes who threw chestnut banquets. Scandalous? Absolutely. But compared to what comes next, those tales are practically bedtime fairy tales. Because in the darker corners of the medieval world, some rulers left body counts so vast, so cruel, and so terrifying that they became legends of horror. Tonight, let's step into the shadows of history, where passion turns into bloodlust and power devours everything in its path. Our first stop, 15th century Wallachia, where a prince named Vlad III earned a nickname that still terrifies today, Vlad the Impaler. Forget fangs and vampires. The real Vlad wasn't seducing maidens in candlelit castles. He was perfecting the art of psychological warfare. His favorite method of execution? Impalement. He would drive a wooden stake through his enemies and leave them to die slowly. Sometimes it took days. In 1462, when the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II marched into Vlad's territory, he was greeted with one of the most nightmarish sights in history, a forest of stakes, with more than 20,000 impaled corpses. Soldiers, peasants, women, children, all left as a grotesque warning. Did it work? Yes, the Ottomans turned back in horror. Vlad's cruelty saved his kingdom, at least for a while. But the legend grew darker. Tales spread that he dined among the impaled, dipping his bread in the blood of his victims. Was it true? Or medieval propaganda? We may never know. What we do know is this. Vlad's body count wasn't measured in lovers or feasts. It was measured in forests of the dead. And it makes you wonder, how much of Dracula's story is myth? And how much is just medieval history being even scarier than fiction? Now let's travel to Russia. Ivan IV, better known as Ivan the Terrible, a ruler who started his reign full of promise and ended it in blood-soaked paranoia. At first, Ivan was clever, ambitious, and determined to modernize Russia. But somewhere along the way, something broke. Maybe it was his childhood trauma watching nobles poison his family. Maybe it was the endless wars. Whatever the reason, Ivan unraveled. He created the Oprichniki, black-cloaked secret police, who terrorized the population. They rode black horses, carried severed dog heads as symbols of loyalty, and massacred entire towns on the Tsar's orders. In Novgorod alone, thousands were drowned, burned, or tortured. Ivan's cruelty wasn't just for enemies. In a fit of rage, he struck his own son with an iron staff, killing him instantly. A father murdering his heir, leaving behind a broken dynasty. His body count, tens of thousands. His legacy? A ruler so terrifying that terrible feels almost too gentle a word. If Vlad created forests of the dead, Timur, also known as Tamerlane, built pyramids of skulls. Born in the 14th century, Timur rose from humble beginnings in Central Asia to forge a vast empire through sheer brutality. He styled himself as a new Genghis Khan, and he lived up to the comparison in the worst possible ways. When he captured Delhi, he ordered a massacre so vast that 100,000 people were slaughtered in a single day. In Baghdad, he stacked 90,000 skulls into towers. In Damascus, he burned the city and carried its artisans into captivity. But Timur wasn't mindless. He saw terror as a weapon. He knew that the rumor of his cruelty traveled faster than his armies. Cities surrendered at the mere mention of his name. His empire stretched from India to the Mediterranean, but at what cost? Millions dead, countless cities in ruins. Timur didn't just kill, he turned death into architecture. Of course, we can't talk about body counts without mentioning Genghis Khan, the man who built the largest land empire in history and possibly the deadliest. In the 13th century, Genghis and his Mongol hordes swept across Asia like a storm. They destroyed cities, erased kingdoms, and reshaped the map of the world. Conservative estimates place the Mongol conquests at around 40 million deaths, yes, 40 million. That's more than some modern wars. When the Mongols besieged Nishapur, after one of Genghis's sons-in-law was killed, the enraged Khan ordered the city's total destruction. Men, women, children, every last inhabitant slaughtered. Some chronicles claim the death toll reached 1.7 million in that single massacre. Yet, paradoxically, Genghis also established order. Under his rule came religious tolerance, trade routes, and laws. He was both destroyer and builder, apocalypse and architect. It's this duality that keeps his story so haunting. Was he a monster or a genius reshaping the world by fire? Not all medieval body counts came from cruelty. Some came from madness. Charles VI of France, ruling in the late 14th century, began his reign as a promising young king. But soon his mind betrayed him. He suffered terrifying psychotic episodes. Sometimes he forgot who he was. Sometimes he claimed he was made of glass and would shatter if touched. In one infamous episode, Charles suddenly turned on his own army, slaughtering his men in a frenzy before collapsing. His madness wasn't just personal, it shattered France. Rival factions fought to control the kingdom, plunging the nation into chaos. The 100 Years' War raged on, fueled by a king who no longer recognized reality. Charles's body count wasn't one of deliberate cruelty, but of neglect, paranoia, and fractured leadership. His broken mind broke a nation. So what do we make of all this? From queens who collected lovers to kings who collected skulls. From popes who partied to tsars who murdered their own. Sun's medieval history is filled with body counts of every kind. Some measured their lives in affairs, others in children, and the darkest of them all in fields of corpses. And maybe that's the strangest lesson of all. History remembers numbers, how many died, how many ruled, how many children were born. But behind those numbers were human lives, families, faces, stories. Every scandal, every massacre, every feast was lived by real people who laughed, cried, and dreamed just like us. And maybe that's why these stories haunt us. They're not just history. They're echoes of human nature and all its brilliance and all its cruelty. So tonight, as the candle burns low, ask yourself, if history measured your life by its body count, what would that mean? Thank you for listening. Sleep well and dream carefully.